Coincidences between the circumstances of the life and death of Abraham Lincoln and John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which have become an integral part of American folklore. They were first noticed and published in the press in 1964, a year after the mysterious murder of the latter. Life editor: both presidents were the second children in the family. Lincoln had an older sister, Sarah, and Kennedy had an older brother, Joseph Patrick, who was killed in World War II. Both were named after their grandfathers. Lincoln is in honor of his paternal grandfather, Captain Abraham Lincoln, who was killed by Indians, and Kennedy is in honor of his mother's father, the famous politician, John Francis Fitzgerald. Both had congenital genetic diseases. Yes, Lincoln suffered from congenital Marfan syndrome, according to another version, multiple endocrine neoplasia, and Kennedy, spinal bulbar amyotrophy, which later became known as Kennedy's disease. Both presidents liked to sit in a rocking chair. Both under Lincoln and under Kennedy, the rocking chair was located in the president's office in the White House. Also, Lincoln was killed while in a rocking chair. Both presidents were fond of poetry, in particular, works of Shakespeare, loved to tell jokes. A friend and associate of Lincoln was Adlai Ewing Stevenson, a Democrat from the state of Illinois. Kennedy's friend and associate was also Adlai Ewing Stevenson, a Democrat from Illinois, the grandson of the previous one. Family: Jacqueline Kennedy and Mary Todd Lincoln were engaged to other people before marrying their husbands. It is noteworthy that the fiancé of Lincoln's future wife was Stephen Douglas, who in the future lost to Lincoln in the presidential election. Jacqueline Kennedy, in turn, was engaged to broker John Husted. Both first ladies came from aristocratic families, spoke fluent French, and were spendthrifts. The spouses of both presidents got married at the age of 24, while their husbands were already more than 40 years old at the time of the wedding. Lincoln had sons Robert and Edward. Kennedy had brothers Robert and Edward. The sisters of both presidents passed away before their presidency. Lincoln's daughter-in-law was named Mary Eunice. Kennedy's sister's name was Eunice Mary. Both presidents had 4 children. Each president had 2 of his 4 children died, with one before the presidency. 4-year-old Edward Lincoln died in 1850, and in 1956 Kennedy's daughter died at birth, and one more during the presidency. William Lincoln left died in 1862 at the age of 11, and in 1963, Kennedy again had a newborn son. The 2 remaining children of each president survived their parents. Lincoln's son, Robert Todd, was the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain in 1889 to 1893, and Kennedy's father, Joseph Patrick, held the same position in 1938 to 1940. Career editor: Abraham Lincoln was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1846, John F. Kennedy in 1946. Lincoln's main rival in the 1860 presidential election, Stephen Douglas, was born in 1813. Kennedy's main rival in the 1960 election, Richard Nixon, was born in 1913. War was imposed on both presidents almost immediately after their inauguration. In Lincoln's case it was the American Civil War, in Kennedy's it was the Vietnam War. Hostilities began much earlier, but the first U.S. military contingent was sent to Vietnam in 1961. Killers: Booth and Oswald were the same height at 5 feet 8 inches, about 172 centimeters. Both killers came from dysfunctional families, both lost their parents in early childhood. Both Booth and Oswald were killed before the trial, and both with colds. Booth, who managed to escape from custody, was caught up in Virginia and killed by police officer Boston Corbett. Oswald was shot and killed by Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby while being escorted out of the police station. Both murderers were arrested by a policeman named Baker. In the case of Booth, it is the first arrest, after which he managed to hide. Circumstances of death: both presidents were assassinated the day before the holiday. Lincoln on Easter Eve, Kennedy on Thanksgiving Eve. Both presidential spouses were accompanied by another married couple during the murders. For example, Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln attended the theater with Officer Harry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris 8, and John and Jacqueline Kennedy rode in a car with Texas Governor John Bowdoin Connolly and his wife Nellie. Both Rathbone and Connolly were wounded in assassination attempts on presidents, and both were not fatally wounded. 813 The surnames Rathbone and Connolly consist of 8 letters, English Rathbone, Connolly. Both presidents did not die immediately after the assassinations. Both presidents died in places whose dual names both began with the letters P and H. Lincoln died at Peterson's house, Kennedy is at Parkland Hospital. The dates of the elections to the House of Representatives and the beginning of the presidency with a difference of 100 years are not surprising, because the presidential and parliamentary elections in the USA are held every even number of years. The coincidence that both presidents were killed on a Friday is explained by the fact that public events, such as a theatrical performance or a presidential visit to the city, are usually held on the weekend or the day before, that is, on a Friday. The fact that both Kennedy and Lincoln were killed by a shot to the head is due to the fact that the shooters had no other choice. While it was impossible to shoot in the chest area in both cases, Booth approached Lincoln from behind and he was sitting in a rocking chair, and Oswald also aimed at Kennedy from behind. The only place that could have guaranteed a fatal match was in both cases there was a head. The fact that the vice presidents under both presidents were namesakes is explained by the prevalence of the surname Johnson in the USA, second place after the surname Smith. At this time, there are over 200 reliable matches found between Lincoln and Kennedy, as well as their vice presidents, assassins, and too much even the assassins' assassins. Yes, both Jack Ruby and Boston Corbett changed names, were prone to sadism, were in relationships with prostitutes, etc., but all similarities between them are minor and, according to the creators of Snopes.com, are easily understood and trivial.